Good morning, fourth grade. This week we have been discussing about ecosystems and how they are important for our environment and its organisms. Today we're going to take a close look at how these ecosystems are able to interact with one another using food chains. Before we get started, I have one quick reminder for you guys. Please make sure that you have a science notebook ready for next week. We'll be adding our different definitions and food chain information into our notebook. You can get a notebook that looks like this. It is okay if you don't have all the other entries. I just want you guys to have something to add to your notebook for the rest of the quarter. Now let's talk about our ecosystems. We have learned through our lessons that ecosystems are communities with organisms and how they interact with its non-living environment, such as the food, the temperature, and the homes. Ecosystems are able to provide food and homes for all organisms. Scientists like to study and explore how these organisms get their food, and they use something that we call a food chain. Food chains show a sequence of living things in which one organism eats another to be able to receive energy. Most animals eat more than one thing, so to show all the different types of relationships with food, we use food webs, kind of like this one. See how this tree we have in the middle, it gives its energies to chipmunks, birds, snakes, and then there are different animals that receive the energy from there. Let's read about food chains so that we can learn more about how they give us information on how energy is distributed to different organisms in an ecosystem. Energy in food can be traced back to the sun. Living things need a constant supply of energy. The sun provides that energy, which is transferred into food by plants through photosynthesis. Plants have a special power that they are able to receive light from the sun and use it to turn that sun into sugars, which gives them energy to grow. We were able to see that one of the main things plants need to survive and grow is sun, water, and soil. So these three things together provide plants with energy. Let's keep reading on how this helps out other organisms in an ecosystem. Herbivores, which are plant-eating animals, eat the plants and receive the energy. When the herbivore is eaten by a carnivore, an animal that eats herbivores, the energy from the herbivore is transferred to the carnivore. The transfer of energy from one organism to another makes up a food chain. The food chain starts from the sun, given to the plant, and then herbivores transfer their energy to other animals that are carnivores when they are eaten by them. Let's take a closer look at how these food chains work. Animals eat to get energy and building blocks. Earlier this week, we discussed how organisms like plants and animals need energy in order to be able to grow. Let's see how that energy is given to them. All living things need food to provide materials for growth. Food chains start with organisms that make their own food. They are called producers. Kind of how plants are able to use the light from the sun and use that energy to make it into sugars through photosynthesis. Plants are the most common producers. Animals also have a name. Animals are called consumers because they do not make their own food. They eat or consume other organisms. A food chain typically only has a few steps, usually four, kind of like the picture that we see here. This is because each time one organism eats another, some of that energy is used up and released as heat. In this picture, we are able to see how the energy from the sun is given to the plants, and this worm eats the grass, receiving the energy from the grass. And the worm has energy, but then a bird will eat a worm to get its energy, its nutrients and food. So the energy is now at the bird. The bird can be eaten by a snake. So the energy has been transferred from the bird to the snake. And now the snake has the energy, but a snake is then eaten by a hawk, which it now receives the energy that all came from the sun, giving energy, that all came from the sun, producing energy for the plants through its light. It is one big cycle on how the food is transferred throughout. Now, a food web is a model of intersecting food chains. Since more than one organism can be eaten, we need to look at food webs. Most organisms can eat and be eaten by many different animals. A food chain won't be able to show this. It just goes straight up. Food webs show all these connections. They are more complicated, but much more accurate. In the African savanna food web shown here, we can see multiple arrows pointing to different animals. Let's take a look. We see that the grass and the trees are at the bottom, but we have an arrow pointing up to a zebra. We also see that the energy from the grass and the trees is also being passed on to a gazelle and a yak. But then if we move on to the next level, we see that these three animals transfer their energy to two different animals, like a cheetah. And then even above that, there is a lion, can receive its energy from either the cheetah, the gazelle, the zebra, or the yak. So the lion is at the top of the food chain. The arrows show the direction the energy is transferred. So notice the energy is going up. For example, we can see the zebras eat trees and grasses. So the arrows from trees and grasses are pointing to a zebra. The arrows pointing from the zebras to the hyenas and the lion tell us that the zebra is eaten by these animals. The zebra is eaten by these animals so that these animals can receive the energy the zebra got from the grass. The lions are at the top of the food web, which means they are not eaten by any other type of animal because they are the king of the jungle. Only animal that eats a lion is a decomposer when the lion dies. Now, what is a decomposer? We really don't see it on this food chain. Let's move on to this slide so we can read a bit more about decomposers and why they are so important to food webs and food chains. Decomposers break down dead organisms. One group of consumers that is often not shown in food webs are Decomposers. Decomposers are organisms, mostly bacteria and fungi, that break down dead plants and animals, eventually turning them into nutrients that will be added to soil. Remember at the beginning of the year when we're talking about soil and how soil is made up of different things, um, like different sized rocks. It also has nutrients from animals and plants that have decayed. Decomposers, like bacteria, help these dead animals break down to tiny pieces so that their nutrients are able to get back into the soil. These nutrients are very important to continue the cycle in the ecosystem. Slugs, earthworms, millipedes, and centipedes will also help break down these dead things. Without decomposers, nutrients would not get recycled, and we would have dead material piled up everywhere. We know that grass and trees need nutrients in their soil, so they need that decomposers to break down the nutrients from the animals so that they are able to grow, and also so there isn't dead bodies of animals and plants just lying everywhere.